My name is Daniel Brooks. I'm 50 years old, and until that Thursday evening, I would have told anyone my life was predictable in the safest possible way. I was an insurance advisor in Seattle. I wore press shirts, sat through long client meetings, talked people through risk for a living, and came home later than I should have most nights. My wife, Melissa, used to joke that I could turn disasters into spreadsheets. 28 years of marriage had a way of sanding the edges off everything. You stopped asking whether you were happy and started assuming stability was the same thing. That evening, rain had started just before 5. Not a storm, just that thin gray Seattle drizzle that made the whole neighborhood look washed out. I got home early because a client canceled, and for once I liked the idea of beating traffic, pulling into the driveway, maybe surprising Melissa. The house was quiet. Her car was there, but she wasn't inside. I figured she was in the backyard studio or out on a walk. I changed out of my jacket, then remembered I had left a box of old extension cords in the garage that Tyler wanted for some project at school. The garage smelled like cold concrete motor oil and damp cardboard. Half the overhead bulb was burned out, so everything sat in that yellow, shadowy light that made ordinary things look older than they were. I found the cords in the back corner near Melissa's gardening shelf. When I pulled the box free, I bumped an old red toolbox sitting underneath the workbench. Dust covered the lid, thick enough that I could see where something had been moved recently. That caught my eye. Melissa never used that toolbox. Neither did I. I opened it because I thought maybe Tyler had stuffed something in there. Inside, under a folded shop rag and a rusted tape measure, was a phone. Not an old phone, not one of our dead upgrades, shoved away and forgotten. This one was charged, clean, hidden carefully. I just stood there for a second, holding it in my hand, hearing rain tick against the garage door. My first thought was stupidly innocent. Maybe Tyler's, maybe a work phone. Maybe there was some explanation so boring I'd feel embarrassed for even noticing it. Then the screen lit up, no lock, one swipe, and the messages opened where they had been left. Melissa's name wasn't there, because it didn't need to be. It was her number, and above it was one contact. Kyle, her yoga instructor. I read the newest message first. Miss you already. Then I kept going. There were 16 months of messages. 16 months of hotel rooms, excuses, photos taken in mirrors I recognized. Afternoons, she said she was volunteering. Mornings, she told me she had class. I scrolled with my thumb and felt something inside me go still. Not broken, not exploded, just still. At 6:12 p.m., I heard the back door open inside the house. Melissa was home, and I was standing in the garage, holding the second phone she never thought I'd find. Before I found that phone, I would have described my marriage the way people describe the weather in a city they've lived in too long. Familiar, manageable, nothing worth making a fuss about. Melissa and I had been married for 28 years. We met young, built everything the slow way, and stayed together through the years when other couples we knew started splitting apart. We bought a modest house in Seattle before prices went insane. We raised our son, Tyler, in that house. We sat through soccer games in the rain, parent-teacher conferences under buzzing fluorescent lights, and long holidays with overcooked turkey and too many dishes in the sink. It wasn't glamorous, but it was ours. Melissa used to be the center of every room without trying. Not loud, not dramatic, just warm. She could make people feel noticed. For years, I thought that warmth belonged safely at home. I thought being dependable was enough in return. I worked long hours because that was what men like me were taught to do. Provide first. Ask questions later. Insurance advising paid well, but it took pieces out of me. Early flights. Late dinners with clients. Weekend calls I told myself were temporary. I wore Navy suits, carried 2 phones for work, and spent too much of my life under hotel lighting. Every year I promised things would slow down. Every year they didn't. Melissa adjusted the way good wives do when they're tired of waiting to be asked. She built routines that didn't include me. Morning yoga, volunteer work at a community food bank, lunch with women whose names I only half remembered. She started eating cleaner, dressing sharper, smiling at her phone more often. At the time, I let myself believe that was healthy. People evolve. Marriages settle. Not every silence means danger. Tyler was grown by then, mostly out of the house, balancing college classes with part-time work. He still came by for dinners, sometimes. Melissa lit up around him in a way she no longer did around me, and I noticed it without admitting what it meant. We had become a functional household instead of a close one. No screaming matches, no broken plates. Just two people moving around each other with practiced politeness. The distance didn't arrive all at once. It came quietly. A hand pulled away a second too soon. A bedtime shifted later. A laugh answered by a glance at a screen instead of my face. Small things. Easy things to dismiss when you're tired and proud and afraid of sounding pathetic. Looking back, that was a real danger. Nothing in my life fell apart with a crash. It drifted, and I was the last person in my own house to admit it. I put the phone back exactly where I found it. Same angle, same folded rag on top, same layer of dust, disturbed just enough to look untouched if you didn't know better. My hands moved carefully, like I was resetting a scene after breaking something fragile. Then I closed the toolbox. For a second, I just stood there in the garage, listening. The rain had gotten heavier. I could hear Melissa moving inside the house. Cabinet doors opening, the soft clink of plates. Normal sounds. Ordinary. The kind of sound that belonged to a life I had just watched collapse in complete silence. I took a breath, wiped my hands on my jeans, and walked back inside. She was in the kitchen, standing by the counter with her back to me, slicing something green. Cucumber, I think. She had changed into one of those fitted athletic tops she started wearing more often. Her hair was tied up loosely, a few strands falling around her neck. "Hey," she said without turning. "You're home early." Her voice was light. Easy. Exactly the same. "Yeah," I answered. Client canceled. I set my keys down in the same spot I always did. The sound felt louder than usual. She glanced over her shoulder and smiled. Not forced. Not nervous, just normal. That was the part that stayed with me. 16 months, and she could still look at me like that. "I was thinking we could do salmon tonight," she said. "I picked some up earlier." "Sounds good." I washed my hands at the sink beside her. The water ran cold at first, then warmed. I watched it more than I needed to. Anything to avoid looking at her too long. We moved around each other in the kitchen like we had done for years. She seasoned the fish. I set the table. 2 plates, 2 glasses. Same routine, executed perfectly. At one point, her phone buzzed on the counter. She picked it up quickly. Too quickly. Just a glance. A small smile. Then she set it back down like nothing mattered. I didn't ask. We ate at 7:03 p.m. I remember the time because I looked at the clock and fixed it in my head for no reason I could explain. The salmon was slightly overcooked. She apologized for it. "Got distracted," she said. "It's fine," I replied. We talked about nothing. A neighbor's new car. Tyler's classes. A story from her volunteer shift. I nodded in the right places. Asked simple questions. Played my part, so it almost felt automatic. Inside, everything had already shifted. Not shattered, not chaotic. Just rearranged into something colder. At one point, she laughed. A real laugh. The kind she used to have more often years ago. I watched her carefully when she did. Not with anger. Not even with sadness. With distance. Because somewhere between the garage and that dinner table, I had already understood something she didn't know yet. I wasn't going to confront her. Not tonight. Maybe not ever. That night, I didn't sleep. Melissa fell asleep around 11:20. I remember the time because I was still staring at the ceiling when her breathing changed. Slow, steady, unaware. She turned slightly toward me at one point, her hand resting near my arm, not touching. Close enough to look familiar, far enough to feel like a stranger. I stayed there another 20 minutes, then got up. The house felt different in the dark. Quieter than usual. Not peaceful, just hollow. I walked past the kitchen, past the garage door, and out to the car without turning on any lights. The rain had stopped, but the air was damp and cold, clinging to everything. I drove without music. No destination at first. Just empty streets. Traffic lights cycling through colors for no one, reflections stretching across wet asphalt. Seattle at night always felt slower, like the city itself was tired. I fit into that silence easily. I ended up at a marina about 20 minutes from the house. It wasn't a place I visited often, but I knew it well enough. Wooden docks, quiet water, boats shifting gently with the current. A few dim lights reflected on the surface, breaking apart with every ripple. I parked and got out. The air smelled like salt and old wood. Somewhere in the distance, metal clanged softly against a mast. I walked down to the edge of the dock and stood there, hands in my pockets, looking out at the water. This is where most people would say they felt something break. I didn't. No anger. No urge to call her. No need to demand answers or throw accusations across a kitchen table. All of that felt inefficient, loud, temporary. What I felt instead was clarity. 16 months. That number stayed with me, not because of the betrayal itself, but because of what it represented. Planning, consistency, choice. This wasn't a mistake. It was a parallel life, carefully maintained, right under the same roof. I thought about confronting her. I played it out in my head, the shock on her face, the excuses, the tears, maybe even apologies that sounded convincing if you didn't look too closely. And then what? Therapy? Rebuilding? Living with that knowledge every day? No. I watched a small wave hit the side of the boat and disappear without leaving a mark. That felt closer to what I wanted. Clean. Final. I didn't need closure. I didn't need explanations. I didn't need to hear her version of anything. I just needed out. The decision settled in quietly, like everything else had that night. No dramatic moment. No internal speech. Just a shift from thinking to knowing. I was going to leave. Not tomorrow in anger. Not after a confrontation. Not with warnings or ultimatums. I was going to disappear from her life as calmly as I had sat across from her at dinner. No fight. No scene. Just absence. I stood there while longer, letting the idea fully form. Not just leaving, but leaving in a way she couldn't disrupt. Controlled, planned, complete. By the time I walked back to the car, the details were already starting to line up in my head. For the first time that night, I felt something close to steady again. The next morning, I woke up at 6 a.m. like always. Same alarm, same routine. I shaved, dressed, made coffee. Melissa came into the kitchen around 6:30, still half asleep, wrapping a light sweater around herself. She kissed my cheek on her way to the coffee machine. "Morning," she said. "Morning." I watched her pour coffee into her mug, the same chipped, white one she'd used for years. There was something almost clinical about the way I observed everything now. Details mattered. Patterns mattered. Emotions didn't. "Busy day?" she asked. "Yeah, a few meetings downtown." She nodded, distracted, already scrolling through her phone. I didn't need to see the screen to know who might be on the other side of it. I left the house at 7:10, but I didn't go to the office. Instead, I drove to a branch office of my bank across town, not the one we usually used. I had accounts Melissa didn't actively monitor, old ones, tied to earlier investments, things that had just been sitting quietly in the background. I moved money carefully. Not everything. Just enough to establish independence without triggering anything immediate. From there, I went to a law office I hadn't visited in years. His name was Greg. We'd worked together once on a minor contract issue. He didn't ask many questions when I called the night before, just told me to come in early. He looked at me for a long moment after I finished explaining. "No confrontation?" he asked. "No. You're sure?" "Yes." He leaned back slightly, studying me. "Then we do this clean. Quiet. Document everything before she knows anything. That's the plan. We talk through it step by step. Accounts, property, legal separation. I gave him access to everything he needed. Sign what I had to. No hesitation. By 10:45, the structure of my exit was already in motion. On the way out, my phone buzzed. "Tyler." I almost ignored it, but something made me answer. "Hey," I said. There was a pause on the other end. Not long, just enough to register. "Hey, Dad," he replied. His voice sounded off. Careful. You good? Yeah, I just want to check in. Another pause. Then he said something that didn't fit. You're at work? I stopped walking. There it was. Small, subtle, but wrong. Yeah, I said evenly. Why? No reason, he said quickly. Too quickly. Just wasn't sure if you had that meeting today. I looked out at the street, people passing by, cars moving like nothing had changed. Tyler, I said, calm. What's going on? Silence. Then a quiet exhale. I didn't think you'd find out like this. The words landed clean. No confusion. No misunderstanding. I didn't speak. I thought it would just stop eventually, he continued. Mom said it wasn't serious at first. I closed my eyes for a second. How long have you known? I asked. Another pause. A while. The marina from last night flashed in my mind. The still water. The clarity. It shifted slightly. Not broken. Just deeper. I didn't want to get involved, he said. I thought it would blow over. I didn't think. That's enough. I cut in, still calm. He stopped. I opened my eyes again, focusing on nothing in particular. You don't need to explain it right now. Dad, I'll call you later. I ended the call before he could respond. For a moment, I just stood there, phone in hand, the city moving around me like I wasn't part of it. Melissa's betrayal had been one thing, but this had layers. And now the plan wasn't just necessary. It was irreversible. I didn't go home that evening. Instead, I checked into a business hotel near the airport. Neutral walls, clean sheets, no memories attached to anything inside that room. I placed my keys on the desk, my phone beside them, and sat down without turning on the TV. Everything I needed to do was already in motion. Greg handled the legal side. Documents would be served when the timing was right. Financial separation was underway. I had already rerouted my mail to a temporary address. The structure of my old life was being dismantled piece by piece. Quietly, efficiently. Melissa had no idea. I didn't answer her calls that night. There were 3. Then a message. Hey, everything okay? You didn't come home. I read it once, then left it there. Tyler didn't call again. By the second day, I booked a one-way flight. Not somewhere familiar, not somewhere logical. Just far enough to feel like a break in continuity. South Carolina, a small coastal town I'd only ever seen once years ago, during a conference I barely remembered. It wasn't a place tied to anything in my life. That was the point. The flight was early. I wore simple clothes. No suit, no briefcase. Just a single bag with what I needed. I moved through the airport like anyone else. Another middle-aged man heading somewhere forgettable. No one stopped me. No one noticed. By the time the plane took off, Seattle was already behind me. Not emotionally. Not yet. But physically. And that was enough for now. The town I arrived in was quiet. Slower than anything I was used to. Salt air, low buildings, boats lining the docks instead of traffic filling the streets. The kind of place where people didn't rush unless they had a reason. I found a small room above a marina within 2 days. The owner, Frank, didn't ask many questions. Late 60s, steady voice. Hands that looked like they'd built things for decades. His wife, Linda, handled most of the day-to-day. She looked at me once, like she was measuring something, then simply said, "You can stay as long as you need." That was it. No paperwork beyond the basics. No curiosity about my past. I paid in advance. Work came naturally after that, not because I needed the money, but because I needed structure. Frank let me help with repairs, small things at first, cleaning hose, fixing loose fittings, then more, engines, wiring, physical work, quiet work, the kind that didn't follow you home. My hands adjusted before my mind did. Days started early. The sound of water instead of alarms. The smell of salt instead of coffee brewing in a silent kitchen, shared with someone who wasn't really there anymore. I changed small things first. Stopped wearing watches. Stopped checking emails. Cut my hair shorter than I ever had. No one here knew what I used to do, and I didn't offer it. Weeks passed, then a month. Melissa's messages stopped after the first week. Tyler sent one more. Please talk to me. I didn't respond. Not yet. At night, I would sit by the water behind the marina, watching the tide shift in slow, predictable patterns. There was something steady about it. No surprises. No hidden layers. Just movement. For the first time in years, my life wasn't built around maintaining something. It was empty, and that emptiness didn't feel like loss. It felt like control. The work was simple, but it demanded attention. You couldn't rush a cracked hull or ignore corrosion in a motor. If you missed something small, it turned into something expensive later. I liked that. Problems here didn't hide behind smiles or polite conversations. They showed themselves clearly, and you either fixed them or you didn't. Frank worked beside me most mornings. He didn't talk much while we worked. Just short instructions, the occasional correction. Not like that. Tighten it slower. Listen to the sound, not the tool. Linda handled the office and the small store attached to the marina. Coffee in the mornings. Sandwiches around noon. She always set aside a plate for me without asking what I wanted. They never asked why I was there. That mattered more than anything they could have said. I moved into a rhythm. Wake up before sunrise. Coffee outside, sitting on a wooden step that creaked the same way every morning. Air thick with salt. Boats rocking slightly. Ropes pulling tight and loosening again in slow cycles. Then work until my hands were sore enough to feel real. At night, I'd clean up, eat whatever Linda had left out, and sit by the water. No calls. No emails. No explanations. The silence wasn't empty anymore. It had weight to it. Structure. About 3 weeks in, Frank handed me a more complicated repair. Engine issue. Something I would have outsourced without thinking in my old life. You can handle it, he said. I didn't answer. Just nodded. It took me most of the day. I made mistakes. Had to redo parts of it twice. At one point, I just sat there, staring at the open engine, hands dirty, thinking about how different this was from anything I used to do. No clients, no presentations, no pretending to care about things that didn't matter. Just a problem in front of me. I fixed it just before sunset. When the engine finally turned over clean, steady, no stutter, I felt something shift. Not pride exactly. Something quieter. Frank just nodded once. Good. That was enough. Weeks turned into months. I stopped checking the news. Stopped thinking in terms of schedules and obligations. The version of me that lived in Seattle started to feel distant, like something I used to understand but didn't need anymore. Melissa crossed my mind less often. When she did, it wasn't emotional. It was observational, like reviewing a case file that had already been closed. Tyler was different. I thought about that call more than I expected. The pauses. The way he already knew what I was going to ask before I asked it. There was a time I would have called him immediately, demanded answers, tried to fix it. But that version of me didn't exist here. Here, things were handled when they were necessary, not before. One evening, Linda sat down across from me while I was eating. You planning to stay? She asked. I looked out at the water before answering. For now. She studied me for a moment, then nodded. That's usually how it starts. No judgment, no curiosity beyond that, just acceptance. That night, I stayed outside longer than usual. The tide was coming in slow and steady, covering the exposed sand inch by inch. No resistance, no hesitation, just movement forward. I realized something then. I wasn't healing. I was replacing. And whatever I was building here, it didn't need anything from the life I left behind. It arrived on a Tuesday morning. No return address. Just my name written in a way that felt too familiar. Not printed. Not rushed. Careful. Controlled. Melissa. I stood there for a moment, the envelope in my hand, feeling the weight of something I had already decided to leave behind. Frank was working on the far side of the dock. Linda was inside. The marina moved like it always did. Quiet, steady, unchanged. Only this didn't belong here. I didn't open it right away. I finished what I was doing first. Tightened a loose bracket on a small fishing boat. Wiped my hands clean. Put the tools back exactly where they belonged. Routine mattered. It kept things in order. Then I went to sit by the water. The envelope tore cleanly. Inside was a single folded letter. No extra pages. No dramatics. I recognized her handwriting immediately. Daniel, I know you don't want to hear from me. I understand that now. But you deserve the truth, even if you never answer me. I paused there, eyes fixed on the water, then kept reading. The affair is over. Not because I ended the way I should have, but because I found out I wasn't the only one. Kyle had been seeing other women. More than one. One of them was someone I trusted. Someone close to me. I didn't know. I really didn't. I read that line twice. Not because I believed it. Because it didn't matter if it was true. I thought what I had with him was real. I convinced myself of that. I told myself stories about why it was different, why it was justified. I was wrong. The words were steady. No excuses written directly, but they were there between the lines. I tried to end it months ago. I couldn't do it. Not because of him. Because of me. That was the first honest sentence in the entire letter. I kept reading. When you left, I didn't understand at first. I thought you were just angry, that you needed space. Then I realized you knew, and that you chose not to say anything. That's when I understood what I had actually done. I folded the letter slightly, pressing it between my fingers. The marina was quiet, just water moving against wood. I found you because I followed what you left behind. Financial traces, small things you didn't fully erase. I'm not here to pull you back. I just need to see you once. No arguments. No expectations. Just once. The letter ended without love. Just her name. Melissa. I sat there for a long time after finishing it, not thinking about her. Thinking about the timing. She didn't reach out when she thought she still had control. She reached out when she lost it. Kyle wasn't special. He was just another man playing the same game, better than she expected. And when that illusion broke, she looked back at what she had destroyed. Predictable. I looked out at the water, calm, steady, unchanged by anything in that letter. For months, I had built something here without interference. No noise, no past, just structure. And now, for the first time since I left, something from that life had reached me directly, not through memory, not through thought, but physically. I folded the letter once, clean and precise, and set it beside me. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel satisfaction either. Just awareness. This wasn't closure. This was unfinished business trying to pull itself back into my life. And for the first time since I left Seattle, I considered whether I would allow it. I didn't answer the letter that day. Or the next. I let it sit on the small table in my room above the marina, exactly where I placed it. Folded. Unmoved. Like everything else in my life here. Controlled, untouched unless necessary. 3 days later, I called the number at the bottom of the page. She picked up on the second ring. Daniel. Her voice was quieter than I remembered, not softer, just reduced. I'll meet you once, I said. Public place. No delays. A pause. Then, okay. We chose a small hotel about 30 minutes outside town. Neutral ground. Nothing tied to either of us. I arrived early. Of course I did. I sat in the corner of the lobby, back to the wall, facing the entrance. Old habits didn't disappear. They just changed shape. I ordered coffee I didn't plan to drink and watched the door without staring directly at it. She walked in at exactly 2:07 p.m. Melissa looked different, not in a dramatic way. No visible breakdown. No obvious signs of chaos. But the details were off. Her posture was tighter, her movements more careful. The confidence she used to carry without effort was gone. She saw me immediately, stopped for half a second, then walked over. "Hi," she said. I nodded once. "Sit." She did. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence wasn't uncomfortable. It was precise, measured. "I'm not here to argue," she said finally. "I know." Her hands were folded together on the table. I noticed the small things. No wedding ring. Good. I read your letter. I said. She nodded. "Then you know." "I know what you wrote." A slight flinch. She understood the difference. She took a breath. It ended badly. Worse than I expected. I thought I understood what I was doing, but I didn't. I didn't respond. I wasn't the only one, she continued. And when I found out, it just collapsed. Everything I thought was real about it wasn't. That doesn't change anything, I said calmly. I know, she said quickly. I'm not saying it does. Another pause. Then she said something that shifted the air slightly. I tried to stop months before you left. I looked at her directly for the first time. Why didn't you? Her eyes dropped for a second, then back up. Because Tyler told me not to. The words landed differently than anything else she'd said. I didn't move. He said I should think about myself for once, she continued, her voice steady but thinner now. That I'd spent years supporting you, your career, your schedule, and that I deserved something of my own. Silence stretched between us. He knew, I said. Yes. How much? Enough. I leaned back slightly, processing it without showing anything. 2 betrayals. Different shapes. Same outcome. I didn't think it would go this far, she said. Neither did he. That's not relevant. I replied. She closed her eyes briefly, then nodded. No, it's not. We sat there for a moment, everything already said without needing to be repeated. I reached into my bag and placed a folder on the table. Her eyes dropped to it. What is that? She asked quietly. Final paperwork. She hesitated before opening it. Divorce documents. Clean. Structured. Already prepared. You already, she started. Yes. She flipped through the pages slowly. No dramatic reaction. Just a gradual understanding of how complete this was. When? She asked. The day after I found out. Her hands tightened slightly on the paper. You didn't even, she stopped herself. Confront you? I finished. She nodded. No, I said. There was nothing to discuss. That was the moment she lost control. Not outwardly, not with raised voices or tears. But I saw it, the realization that she had never been part of the decision. She signed the papers 10 minutes later. No arguments. No last attempts to change anything. Just a quiet acknowledgement of what was already over. When she finished, she placed the pen down carefully. That's it, she asked. That's it. Another pause. I'm sorry, she said. I stood up. I know. And that was all I gave her. No anger. No forgiveness. Just finality. I left the hotel without looking back. I drove back to the marina the same way I had arrived months earlier. No music. No calls. Just the road. Stretching forward without interruption. But this time, something was different. Not lighter. Not heavier. Just settled. By the time I pulled in, the sun was already low. The water reflected that dull orange glow, steady and predictable. Frank was closing up one of the storage units. Linda stood near the office door, locking it. Neither of them asked where I had been. Frank just nodded once as I passed. Back? He said. Yeah. That was enough. I went up to my room, placed my keys on the table, and sat down for a moment. The letter was still there, exactly where I had left it. I picked it up, looked at it once more, then folded it tighter and placed it in a drawer. Not hidden, just stored, like everything else that no longer needed to be part of my day. The next morning, I was back at work before sunrise. Routine didn't wait. A week passed. Then 2. Nothing followed me from that meeting. No calls. No messages. Melissa understood what I had made clear without needing to repeat it. Final meant final. Tyler was different. He called again. I let it ring the first time. Answered the second. Hey, he said. His voice was careful again. Controlled. Hey. A pause. I heard it's done, he said. It is. Another pause. I messed up, he said. I thought I was helping her. I didn't think. You weren't helping, I said calmly. You were choosing sides without understanding the consequences. Silence. I know that now. I didn't respond immediately. The ocean moved in the background, steady against the dock. I'm not cutting you off, I said finally, but things aren't the same. I get that. Don't come here expecting things to feel normal, I continued. You come here understanding they won't. Okay. That was the boundary. Clear, simple, non-negotiable. He visited 2 months later. We didn't talk about the past in detail. We didn't need to. The distance between us said enough. But we sat by the water, shared a quiet meal, and for the first time, he didn't try to explain anything. That was the closest thing to progress. Life continued, not rebuilt, replaced. I kept working at the marina. The physical rhythm never lost its value. Problems stayed simple. Solutions stayed visible. And then there was Rachel. She owned a small cafe near the docks. Nothing fancy. Just good coffee, clean tables, and a way of speaking that didn't leave space for confusion. We didn't start with anything complicated. Just conversations. Short at first, then longer. She asked direct questions. I gave direct answers. No performance. No versions of myself designed to be accepted. One evening, she said, "You don't seem like someone who lies." "I don't," I replied. She nodded. "Good. I don't either." That was enough. Months passed. Tyler graduated. He came down again, stayed longer this time. The distance between us didn't disappear, but it stabilized, defined, managed. One evening, we stood by the marina, watching the water the same way I had done alone for so long. "You're different here," he said. "I am. Are you happier?" I looked out at the horizon before answering. "More accurate," I said. He didn't fully understand that, but he didn't argue. That was new. After he left, I walked back toward the cafe. Rachel was closing up, wiping down the counter. She looked up as I walked in. "Long day?" she asked. "No," I said. "Just clear." She smiled slightly. "That's better." I nodded once. Outside, the water moved the same way it always did. No sudden changes. No hidden currents. Just steady motion forward. I stood there for a moment, watching it. Then I turned away and went inside. I didn't look back. Not because I couldn't. Because I didn't need to anymore.